Alright guys, so I'm going to walk you guys through some very basics of English grammar. Just some things you should know to be successful in any college level, lit, comp, basically any humanities class. So what I want to do is kind of start off with just some general parts of speech to make sure we're all on the same page here. So I want you to open and save the document I gave you. So you already know verbs, nouns, adjectives, adverbs. There's one thing I want to make sure you guys really understand. Conjunctions, when we get to conjunctions, they're really important because conjunctions are what fix comma splices, which a lot of people have trouble with. Comma splices are where you put two sentences together, basically smush them together incorrectly. So generally a conjunction is the thing that fixes it. So instead of saying I like to run and swim in the summertime, comma, I don't like working out, you just add a conjunction in between. So that's pretty much it as far as the basic grammar rules. There's a few capitalization rules I want to make sure you guys know. You always capitalize the first word in a quotation. That's really important. You also want to capitalize major works as well. Any type of written literary work, you want to make sure you capitalize movies, art, music, as well as specific courses. So if you have a course like English 101, you want to capitalize that. But if you're saying I'm studying English, you don't have to capitalize that, or studying psychology or whatever it might be. And then lastly, as far as brand names and product names goes, you want to capitalize proper brand names, but you don't have to capitalize generic names like jeans or soap or whatever it might be. So now to the stuff that people have a lot of trouble with. Fragments and run-ons are two areas people always struggle with. Know that a fragment is something that has a subject or a verb, but usually not both. So if you say it out loud and you say she wants, you're missing the subject, right? You're saying she wants something, but we don't know what that is. But he's all right. That does not have a verb. We need a verb in there. A run-on is where you have two or more independent clauses incorrectly joined together. So Sarah is going to the store, there she will buy groceries. We're missing a comma and a conjunction. For example, comma, and there she will buy groceries. Run-ons are tricky for a lot of people. Like I said, a comma splice is very similar, but it's when you incorrectly connect two independent clauses with a comma. So for example, right here, she said she was hungry, comma, we ate tacos. Again, we're just missing a conjunction to fix it. We could also fix it with something like a semicolon. So when we talk about independent and dependent clauses, which I'm going to get to in just a minute, an independent clause is something that contains a subject and a verb, and therefore it can stand by itself as a sentence. A dependent clause cannot stand by itself. So for example, right here, but I could never do that. That's missing the subject. So we need to have that stand alone. Or we need it connected with something that can stand alone, which is an independent clause. Another thing we want to make sure is that your subject and verbs are always in agreement. So he is, not he am. The two dogs are rather than the two dogs is. And then the tense has to match the subject. So he goes to see her every week, not he go, or he goed even. Like that would be incorrect, obviously. Ellen and Josh love, not Ellen and Josh loves. So punctuation is another thing I want to make sure that you guys really understand. You know the basic punctuation, of course, but colons and semicolons are where a lot of people get things confused. So I just want to make sure this is very clear. A colon is used to create a list which follows an independent clause generally. So any type of supplementary information. It's something that cannot stand on its own usually. So he had to get food for the party, colon, chips, soda, and salsa were needed. A semicolon connects two independent clauses. So to double check yourself, all you have to do with a semicolon is look at the first sentence. Can it stand on its own? Yes. She felt the need to eat junk food and relax. Look at the second sentence. It had been an extremely tough week. Can that stand on its own? Yes, absolutely. So I know I've correctly joined the two together. So as long as there's two independent clauses on either side of it, then you've used the semicolon correctly. Double quotation marks, of course, you know how to use. Single quotation marks people always get a little bit confused on as well. So single quotation marks are used to indicate that there's a quote within a quote. So I'm going to give you an example right here. This is a quote from a guy named Dr. Hodgins, and it says, Dr. Hodgins notes, and this is his quote, Shakespeare's Beatrice exclaims, now I have Shakespeare's quote within there, so I need to set that off. I can't use another double quote, so I'm going to have to use a single quote. When that Shakespearean quote is over, again I use a single quote. I go back to finish my quote from Dr. Hodgins, and then I use a double quote to finish it. So hopefully that makes sense. Just take a look at that if you need a second, pause me, just to make sure you really understand how single quotation marks work. And the last things I want to make sure we understand, dashes, hyphens, N dash, and M dashes, they can get a little bit confusing. Just note that people often use dashes to kind of stop a thought and continue on with the thought. That's not the right way to use it. We use that in emails and texts all the time. If you're going to use a hyphen, what you're doing is really connecting two words. If you're using an N dash, then it's really, an N or N dash is really, it's not often used. Here the M dash is the most common, and really that's just to insert information that you are trying to draw attention to. So for example, you are the one, M dash, the only one, M dash, who stood by me. And then lastly, ellipses. Ellipses are the dot, dot, dot that a lot of people use. Do not use them after etc. A lot of people do this. It's incorrect. You only use it to indicate an omission from a sentence. So, for example, if I was doing a partial quote, dot, dot, dot would indicate that there's more to that quote, but that this is the part that I am looking at. So, dot, 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 and Juliet is the sun. A few things to know about writing style. You want your style to be clean and clear and precise above everything else. So there's a lot of things to avoid. Avoid contractions like don't. Avoid colloquialisms like he is super excited or it was wicked amazing or wicked awesome. Again, no informal words or phrases. So if something you would, like I say, probably text it to a friend, you probably don't use it in a formal essay. So don't ever use abbreviations. Surprisingly, I've actually had these in essays from students. Don't use words like gonna or ain't. And again, definitely don't do words like whatevs or anything remotely close to those. You want to make sure that your writing is clear and well organized, so avoid sweeping generalizations. This can be really tricky when you're talking about devices subject matter. So just avoid generalizations about a group of people. Don't group people of one sex, religion, race, etc. together. Don't say all women do this or all French people do this. And then avoid overly complex sentence structures. So break it down, make it clean and simple. And then your writing should be complex and engaging. So you don't want to be overly complex, but that doesn't mean you want it to be one sentence, one sentence, one sentence. You want to vary your style a little bit. So that just gives you a little example of using higher level vocab, complex sentences meaning combining sentences together, and you want to eliminate all informal words, phrases, and ideas, including informal tone. So you would never say, you know, this. I'll give you an example here, but you would never say, that jerk cut me off on the freeway and I yelled at him until I wasn't going to yell no more. You would say, a rude man cut me off on the highway and ended up yelling at him loudly. And that's just a silly example, but it gives you an idea of how you can elevate your writing style to a higher level. And then lastly, you want to make sure you have a logical organization. So traditionally, an essay is going to look something like an introduction plus a thesis statement, which tells me what your argument is. Your main ideas. This is not the traditional 5-paragraph. It doesn't have to be like that. But somewhere in the middle, you got to put your main ideas. And then some type of conclusion, which restates your argument and what your main ideas were. So you want to make sure that you use lots of scholarly terminology, evidence, resources, scholarly language. That's very, very important. And use good research when you're backing things up, solid scholarly research. Just a few details to make sure, things that people always forget or aren't sure about. You want to write out numbers that are smaller than 100, so make sure you write those out. You want to integrate your quotes by using what's called a signal phrase. This is important because a lot of people don't do this. You can never have a quote completely by itself where it's just, if it looked just like this, right? You don't want to have just a quote. You have to have some kind of introductory statement which goes in the same sentence. So she exclaimed, he says, I answered. Anything like that would work. You don't want to ever be like this, where it's just a sentence, period, a quote, punctuation, and another sentence. This is when I have to write an essay an awful lot. If you don't put a signal phrase with it, it's called an orphan quote. So if you see me saying orphan quote, it means I want you to put a signal phrase with it. Use a comma with the signal phrases as well. Doesn't matter if it comes before or after the quote. And then always, always, always cite, which you already know. Use MLA, and again, proper MLA formatting, which we've already gone over. But it's here in case you need it again. It gives you in-text citation ideas, all these different things. So the last thing I want to make sure I go over is the writing process itself. So when you're writing, there's a few things I'm going to kind of ask you to do. Brainstorming is important. You want to make sure you kind of think of a few things ahead of time to get your ideas flowing. You're going to choose an argument. You're going to decide, this is what I'm talking about, this is what I'm arguing. Organization, very important, and this kind of gives you a step-by-step guide for some good organizations. And then you're going to write your rough draft. Once you write that, you want to make sure you take time to revise and edit. This is very important. A lot of people end up skipping this step because they maybe don't start their essay until Saturday or Sunday or something like that. Don't do that. Make sure you leave yourself plenty of time to revise and edit. This is where it goes from good to great. And then if you're like me, you want to do a file edit, a final sweep over to make sure that there's no more typos, nothing's missing, nothing's out of place, etc. Turn in your final draft and you're done. So at the bottom of this document, I've given you some helpful websites you can look at. A lot of these are really great, really helpful. This Purdue OWL website is one that a lot of professors use. It will tell you anything and everything you need to know about writing, MLA, etc. So if you have any questions about this, let me know. Otherwise, hopefully you find this helpful. Use it as a reference if you ever get stuck or you're confused or you can't quite remember how to cite something. Come back to this document. Save it, use it. It's really helpful.